What's up, everybody? Mark with Cardivox Academy here. And today I'm not doing a reaction video. No way. For two reasons. Number one, I have heard Childchewer by Annihilator more times than I can possibly count. And I get, I don't think it has to be a first time reaction for it to be a reaction video. As somebody who's been listening to metal for the vast majority of my life, if I was like, first time hearing Opeth, you would know I'm lying. You would know, right, that I'm telling a little fib. Number two, I want to answer a much more interesting question with this video, which is, how does somebody like me, who does not scream like Dickie Allen, really at all, from what I can tell? Dickie's a good friend of mine, and I've been lucky enough in person and in video calls. One of my favorite videos on this channel is me for an hour talking vocal technique with him. I'll link it in the description below. Or it's Blasphemian, I think it was. From all we can tell, we don't scream very similarly at all, and yet I love screaming Annihilator covers. And so today what I'm going to show you is how even if you scream differently than someone, you can still do justice to the song. So that's pretty much all I have. So there's going to be a lot of pausing. There's going to be a lot of vocal talk. There's going to be a lot of more detailed explanation of things. So if you're somebody who's like, I hate when reactors pause. Number one, I told you this isn't a reaction video. So use your ears. Number two, hang out anyway. You might have a good time. You might learn something. So let's go ahead and let's get started. I kind of have rough ideas of where I want to pause and what I want to talk about. So here we go. Let's talk about Childchewer, Annihilator. Let's begin. That's the first part I want to pause. Now let's talk a little bit about the way his distortion sounds. Now, one thing to keep in mind with this video is that we are going to inherently be working with partial information, and we're also going to be working with very personal information. And by personal information, I don't mean like my secrets, my journal entries from when I was in high school. What I mean is information that's very specific to me. Here's why it's partial information. I've seen my voice under a scope many, 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 many times in professional settings, like at the University of Utah, at medical examinations, because I go get checked every once in a while, because I use my voice 6 days a week for 14 hours, 15 hours at a time. And then here at home, I've got a little scope that I use here at home, which don't do that by yourself. I'm going to show you some stuff, but you don't do it. So I have information on myself that will only tell us in this video how I do it. I don't want people to watch this video and say, oh, when Mark does false chord highs, I don't really think of them as false chord highs, but that's the term we often use for them. It looks like this, so this must be how all false chord highs are. No, I don't want you to take that away. And number two, as far as I know, we don't have any scopes of Dickie at all. So what we're doing is, I just want to make it clear to everyone that we are putting together pieces. We're putting together a puzzle with partial information. Now, with that being said, I want to talk about the color, tone, and texture of Dickie's high vocals. Number one, they are very smooth. There's some crunch, there's some gravel, but they're very smooth. Now, this is important to understand, because when I scream, even though, again, if you were to sit with him and me and we both did our high screams, you would say, yeah, those sound pretty different. Even though I scream differently, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be trying to match, or at least approximate, that type of smoothness in the distortion. Now, what causes smoothness in our distortion? There are a couple answers to this. But first and foremost, one of the things that can be helpful to understand is the relationship of pressure and tissue activation, right? Pressure and tissue activation. There's a concept that we don't really have to get super sciencey about it, but there's a term called transglottal airflow. Transglottal airflow right now we can think of it as a fancy word of airiness or breathiness. Although a better way to think about it is just the amount of air passing through the glottis, the space where your vocal folds live, in an amount of time. Okay. Now, Mark, why are you going into so much detail about airflow? Because especially with distortion, right? There's going to be a relationship between transglottal airflow and the sound of the grit, because in a lot of distortions, not all of them, but in a lot of distortions, we are, I will say, heavily occluding the space above the vocal cords with tissues such as the false cords, the arytenoids, the aryepiglottic folds. I don't really close off with my aryepiglottic folds, but Will Ramos does. And for anybody who doesn't know what a lot of these mean, just think about it this way. Our voice has multiple doorways. Our vocal tract has multiple doorways, things that we can open and close. There's your vocal cords. There's a bunch of squishy tissues above your vocal cords. And then there's like this space in the back of your mouth called the pharynx. You can close that off with your tongue, right? Or pinch it down, which is, I guess, still going to be with your tongue. But because we are pinching, I shouldn't say pinching, but because we are closing off space with tissue, the amount of airflow coming through and the rigidity of that tissue and the activation of that tissue is going to have, it's all going to be related, right? I want you to think of it this way. I told you we're going in depth in this video. Buckle up, right? I want you to think about something. Hold out your hand like this, okay? Literally, while you're watching this video. Unless you're listening while you drive in the car, then don't, because you're going to use your other hand. Take this other hand and push against it, right? Now you have a couple options, right? You can push against it and nothing moves. This means that both hands are going to be actively working antagonistically against each other, right? It's not always a bad thing per se. Now, let's say maybe you're going to give a little bit and then stop, right? Now, let's say you're not going to resist at all and that hand gets pushed away. In this analogy, we can think of our left hand, I guess, as these supraglottal tissues, and we can think of our right hand as the air pressure that we're building up, right? The more airflow comes through, the more we can decide how much airflow to let through, and how much airflow we're letting through will have an impact on the way that the distortion sounds, right? Now, there's a really easy way to understand this. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to put your lips together. For this, you kind of have to be able to do a lip bubble. If you can't, just listen along. But if you can, follow my lead, right? I want you to take your lips, put them together, and great. Loose lips, high amount of airflow, right? I guess this would be called translabial airflow, but we know. So in phonetics, in anatomical or phonetic settings, your lips are, these are called, like a bilabial sound involves both of your lips. So this would be translabial airflow. Keep it PG in the comments, folks. Keep it PG. But anyway, now what I'm going to do is I want to use my lips to resist that airflow. Just a little bit, right? Maybe like half. So instead of this, I'm going to have to make this muscle, right? This orbital muscle, orbicularis oris, right? I would need to take this muscle and I need to make it firm, and I need to also push these lips together, right? So I'm going to, instead of going like this, loose, I'm going to firm them up. That is going to change the distortion. So there's a direct relationship between the activation of the muscle and the tissue rigidity and how much airflow we move through, right? So all of this being said, what I'm going to do is, instead of going for a low level, clicky high vocal, there is no air for me to fear, right? I'm going to be resisting that airflow a little bit more. I'm going to be using my support muscles, right? Not pushing with my diaphragm, because you can't really push with your diaphragm, but using my core muscles, right? As well as my rib muscles to maintain, or I should say, add some pressure with the airflow, right? So resisting with the tissues above, right? Leaning in to get a more smooth distortion. So instead of low airflow clicky, there is no, going to lean in more. There is no cause for me to fear. Right? Secondly, the next thing I want to, and actually let's go back and let's listen to a little bit of this again. So now we have the distortion, right? Is this the way that he distorts his screams? I can't say for sure, but when we've been in the same space before, it doesn't sound like it. The next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be thinking about the way that he pronounces his word, the way his mouth moves around his words. Oftentimes when we talk about screaming like a vocalist, I noticed that in the greater metal vocal discussion, we tend to limit this conversation to what type of scream is he doing. And then we further limit that conversation to false chord or fry. When I show you some stuff soon, you know, you'll see one thing that people, you know, not everybody, but many people on the internet say is like, oh, if you want to learn false chord highs, talk to Mark. There are plenty of coaches that can teach you false chord highs, by the way. It's not just me. And this term, false chord fry these days, or high these days, is, in my opinion, a little bit more of a cultural term than a term of what's actually going on. Remember, when I show you what's going on with me, it is only my throat, not anybody else's. But let's talk about the way that he is articulating the words, because that also has a really big impact on the delivery and on the technique, right? So let's go to the lyric video is a good choice. Let's go right here. There is no death for me to fear. This is the spot right here. Now, there's a really important concept that we don't have to get super literal about, or I should say super in the weeds about, but it really is helpful if we understand that sound is shapes. And that's a bit of hyperbole. That's a bit of a fun way to like hook the listener. But the way that a sound resonates is going to be directly impacted by the shape of the container that it's moving in, right? So when we listen to his voice, I hear a very small, forward in the front of the face mouth. I don't hear a big open space like you would think about with a lot of like, let's say Mitch Lucker, some of what Ben Dura has been doing with his highs. He's, you know, Dickie is not saying, there is no curse for me to fear. It's not that. It's this small, and this is where he gets the nickname, kind of. It's this small, sort of goblin-y. There is no curse for me to fear, for Christ my Lord has died. Right? And then on the last word, he opens up, rounds a tone to more of this like I think he leans on a tunnel. Let's hear that again, right? Yeah, crucifix, right? Now, is that a perfect one for one? No, not at all. But it does carry some of the color, tone, and texture. All right, let's keep going. There's a lot more to talk about in this song, and I've been yapping. Now there we have, a lot of people would call that a low. To me, it actually hits a little bit more like a mid. Hold on, I use Reaper for self-monitoring. So here we go. Okay, anyway. So what we have here is a really interesting tone. A lot of times when people go low, right? Again, I think of this as more of a mid, but in contrast to the highs, it sounds very low. A lot of times when people go low, what will happen is they will focus very much on like these deep, nasty guttural tones. But that's not exactly what I'm hearing in this space. Again, if we think about the fact that sounds are the result of shapes, the shape of our vocal tract and the shape of our lips, we can kind of pull together a way that we can approximate it. So let's go ahead and let's listen to this one more time. The sun sets. Here we go. His distortion is very grindy. Again, it's very grindy. It's not this low, clicky that I like to use. It's a little bit, again, smoother along the top. That's how I would do it, again, as someone who does not scream the same way that Dickie does. But we want to get that vocal tract shape as well. When I listen to that, right, I hear what almost sounds like a very tubular, like a tubular mouth, right? Now, is this what he was doing in the studio? I have no idea. I wasn't there. But if I was to approximate this, this is how I would do it, right? And this is something that's very valuable for all of you who are watching to understand, is that there's a lot of value in learning to scream and mimic the people that you listen to, but there's always going to be an element of it where if you weren't in the studio with them, you don't actually know for sure what they were doing. So allow yourself to be playful with this. Allow yourself to have some fun, right? So if I take this, the blood. It also is very steady. There's not like a lot of modulation. He's not saying, the blood sweats for you to the flowers. It's even, the blood sets, the sun sets. The sun sets, the blood delivered. Now, at this time, I'm thinking to myself, close-ish, not as close as I would want it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold that tube mouth shape and I'm going to play around with the position of my tongue. Right? One of the best things about metal vocalization, extreme vocalization, is that if it sounds right, or if I should say, if it sounds cool, and it doesn't cause your voice issues in the moment or long term, you can do what you want. There's a lot of freedom to play around. So I'm going to hold this tube sound, or this tube shape, and we're going to play around with getting like sort of a similar grindy sensation, right? Nice. Now, when I have a sound that I like, I'm going to lean in and I'm going to resist. Again, I'm going to resist that airflow. Now, it doesn't sound very vomity, right? So I'm going to like that, like, you know, like that sort of sound, right? What I'm going to be doing, so I want to avoid, I want to avoid this sort of like, sort of thing. The sun sets. That's probably where I would stay. It doesn't have the same tone that he does, but it's easier for me to articulate words that way. And I would rather sound like I'm getting the lyrics mostly correct, right? Versus having like this perfect tone, but not being able to hear those syllables. So I would go for like a the sun sets, the blood delivered. Ooh, right there. Delivered. That's what I would rock with. And by the way, the scream that I'm doing is oftentimes called an epiglottal growl. And I have a whole tutorial on how to do that in another video. Let's go ahead and keep going though, because I want to talk some more about highs so I can show you some really cool concepts. Here we go. So let's go ahead and let's talk more about these highs, right? I love that. Right? So oftentimes when we talk or when we think about high vocals, one thing that a lot of people want to do is they want to focus entirely on squeezing. And this is, again, just from my experience teaching, right? This is my experience teaching. People say, hey, Mark, I want to learn high vocals, whether or not it's one-on-one or more so in the group sessions I've been doing recently, right? It's a situation where they either want to squeeze really hard or shove their larynx as high as they can, or both, right? Now, there's not anything inherently wrong with resisting airflow, and there's not anything inherently wrong with lifting your larynx, right? But what can happen is if we use those as the only control mechanism, we're missing out on a really good way to brighten our tone. That's not as much work, right? So there's this concept, or this term that I'm sure you've heard called twang, right? Twang in the clean singing world. I say the clean singing world, but we use it all the time here as well. So twang is something that oftentimes gets a little bit confused by people. And for me as well, I was confused on it for quite some time early on back in the day when I was just starting like clean singing and things like this. But oftentimes we think that twang is nasality, hyper nasality, and it's not that, right? We can have nasal resonance when we're being twangy. But when we're talking about twang, what's actually happening is the top of so above our vocal folds, we have the supraglottal space, and we have something that we can call, that is often called the laryngeal funnel, right? And that sounds kind of confusing if you're not familiar with all these terms. But if you think about the back of my mouth here, right, this sort of like is a funnel down into the top of the throat, right, where we get these tissues that we distort with. And we have these tissues that sit at the back of, or they sit kind of behind and above the vocal folds, which oftentimes you'll see them called arytenoid cartilages, sometimes cuneiform cartilages. I've seen them called corniculate cartilages before. Right, in this video, I'm just going to be using arytenoid cartilages to talk about the big bulbous tissues that I'll be showing you here in a second. But what these can do is these can actually tilt forward and narrow the space above the vocal folds. And in doing so, we are taking that laryngeal funnel and we are narrowing that as well. This can boost volume so we sound louder without having to push a lot harder, but it also brightens up the frequencies that are bouncing around in our head. And this is actually really easy to kind of see. So if I have this preloaded because I knew I was going to talk about it. I have white noise 10 hours here on Spotify, right? So if I take this, that's my source sound, right? That's my source sound. And I am going to make this sound brighter just with my mouth. Now, this is going to be a lot of the front of my mouth and the larynx, all of this, right? But the concept is going to be the same. The shape of my vocal tract is going to decide how bright or how dark this sounds. Check it out. I'm going to start really dark and then I'm going to brighten it. Again, dark to bright. Now, to do that, I'm using a lot of like my tongue, right? Keep it PG. To do that, I'm using a lot of the tongue, right? But when we're doing twang, right, again, it's the arytenoids tilting forward. Now, when I do twang, again, when I show you this, my epiglottis also leans back in. This is often called distinct twang, where the epiglottis leans in and really narrows the space. But why don't I go ahead and just show you? Give me a quick second here. This is not something that I'm advising you do at home by yourself. This is also not a medical tool. Okay, this is something that I purchased that's for looking inside of drains. And also, this is not a good tool for diagnosing or looking at your own vocal cords, right? And the reason I say that is because when you go to the ENT and they look at your vocal cords, very often, not always, but very often, they're going to be using a stroboscopic tool, which means that it's like strobe lights. And that helps them see the edge of the vocal folds oscillate. Right? This is not that. So if I was at home and I was having issues with my voice, this would not be a stand-in for a trip to an ENT. And I'm telling you that because I don't want people to see this and be like, oh, I'm too scared to go to the ENT. Going to the ENT is not a big deal. If you feel like you need to go to the ENT, just go to the ENT, right? But if I take this, so let me show you a little bit of what twang looks like. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to put some bend in here. Let us begin. So here we go. If you're squeamish, by the way, that's your warning. So that's just a normal tone. You're going to see opening and closing, right? The little white lines, those are my actual vocal folds. And the big basketball things kind of behind them, those are your arytenoids. Here we go, right? Ha, ha. Okay, now let's look at twang. Ha, 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 ha. Do you hear how the first one was kind of bright, almost quacky? and the second one was darker, but the pitches themselves were the same, right? This is one of the features of twang. This is a really important feature for us as metal vocalists to get higher screams without having to do a ton of squeeze or a ton of laryngeal lifting. Again, it's okay to resist airflow, and it's also okay to lift your larynx. But if we use those control mechanisms in excess, it can cause strain, right? So again, here we go. Let's see what these high screams look like. Again, this is what my high screams look like. This is not the definitive answer to what high screams, to know what, you would have to look at a lot of different vocalists and take a lot of different scopes. This is just one scope. So I just don't want people to get on Reddit and be like, the truth about a false chord high from one dude. Okay, so here we go. Actually, let me show you the baseline distortion first to really drive home how this twang thing works. Okay, so, and I'm really taking this pretty far. So I don't even know if this counts as twang because I'm really rocking it. But here's the baseline distortion. You see those arytenoids rattling around against each other. That's what's causing the grid. That's what's causing the distortion. So if I take that, what if before I add the twang, I talk about a concept that I talked about at the beginning of the video, which is that the more we resist the airflow, the more that the rate of distortion is going to change. Check it out. We can see it. We can literally see it happen. Okay, there we go. Let me fix the angle a little bit more. Sorry, everyone. You can see how the distortion changes as I squeeze, release, squeeze, release. So now let's look at these high vocals. Here we go. That guy's really revving his engine. Look at that tiny little space I'm making, right? Isn't that kind of crazy? Look at that tiny little space that I'm making. My epiglottis is coming back. The whole, like, I guess the oropharynx, laryngopharynx is like narrowing up, squeezing. So what's happening there is that, again, that space is, let me turn that off. That really narrow space is helping amplify and brighten the tone. Okay, so one way that we can play around with that, I just put this away, but I remember there's one more thing I want to show all of you. One thing that we can do with that, by the way, is we can whisper. We don't want to just whisper hard and push into it, but we can whisper to find that sound through the shape, right? So if we check this out. So this is a really important aspect of understanding, trying out different metal vocalizations. When I started screaming that way, I didn't think to myself many years ago, oh, let's take the epiglottis and the laryngopharynx and let's squeeze them as hard as we can. I didn't think that. I was just playing around. I was just having fun. And that is a very valid and valuable way to find beginning tones. And I have a whole free course that's entirely about that, where I help a student just play with his voice and find some tones, right? But it's also another example of, again, this concept that I've been really driving home in this video, that sounds are shapes. Sounds are shapes, okay? Like, for example, if I say, ooh, 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 all of you know what shape my lips were, because we know ooh comes from this. So if I go, yeah, 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 I can be sure, again, this is me talking about myself, I can be sure that I have that shape because I know what that sound comes from. So at home, Play around with airflow, play around with whisper, and find something that sounds bright. Does it mean you'll be doing exactly what I'm doing? No, but if you can find something where if you can find something that sounds like that and doesn't put strain on the muscles around your vocal cords, it's probably a good start. Good start to finding a very fun and a very playful way of brightening up the tones. Anyway, I'm rambling again because I'm having fun. Let's keep going. I was waiting for that part. I couldn't remember exactly where it starts, which is funny because I've listened to the song so many times. This part I always mess up. When I'm screaming along at home, I always make up from Sin and Satan sever. He links that all together, and I always mess that up, and I really should know better. So I want to talk about this part here because one thing that can be very difficult for people is lows and speed. Lows and speed, right? Listen how fast he's going. And sink into the flames that sever. Oh, come to Christ for pardon from sin and Satan sever. And sink into the flames that dwell. See, I always mess it up. But anyways, let's talk about this concept. So first and foremost, a lot of this is going to just depend on the way that you are generating your distortion. Right. In this video, I've been using highly compressed vocal techniques, right? The high vocal, which again, most people put in, they call it a high, a false chord high. Great. And I've been using more of like an epiglottal low, which builds on a technique called growl that utilizes, hey, I see skies, right? It builds, at least when I do it, it builds on that. Okay. So you may be doing a more loose, more open distortion. Yo, welcome to Christ for pardon from sin and Satan sever, and sink into the flames to dwell amidst them. Whatever the timing is, right? So a lot of the times, and again, this is something that the metal vocal community, and this is not me throwing shade, this is me being helpful. This is an area where the metal vocal community often overemphasizes this. So many of the new students that I get, again, either one-on-one or in group settings, they want to solve their airflow situation with how open and closed this is, right? Now, obviously, that can be something that works because the whole thing I spent time at the beginning of the video talking about, we have little doors where we can close and we can open, right? Little doors where we can close and we can open. But there's another side of that equation, which is the thing that manages and moves the air, right? And when we do this, this could be a whole hour-long video, so I'm going to try to keep it steady. When we do this, we want to be utilizing a concept, and I actually just recently had a really good conversation with my friend out in Italy. I always mess up his last name. Matteo Ratti, I think it is. Rotti, I don't remember. But he is a very good singer and a very good screamer as well. He works on a lot of like these compressed, like more like rock screams, I guess I should say. But he and I were talking about this concept of appoggio. right? And appoggio. I'm trying to, just on the rare chance he sees this, I'm trying to say it with that Italian accent really well. Appoggio. I'm trying my best, buddy. But anyways, we were talking about this expansion of the ribs, right? And activation of the abdominal muscles, right? And he gave me a really good tool. And so I'm going to pass it along to you, but I want to give credit to the guy who showed me. If you breathe in and then plug up your lips, plug up your mouth with your thumb, you're going to feel those ribs kind of pull and open up, right? That open space, now this is where now I'm talking for myself. I'm not talking for him because if I misrepresent it a little bit, I don't want to throw him under the bus. But I'll link his stuff. I'll link his Instagram in the description below. But anyway, that feeling of the ribs being open is something that we maintain while we scream, right? Ribs are open. When I scream, right, welcome to Christ for a party, from sin and Satan suffer, and sing into the flames I twirl. Right, when I'm doing that, those ribs are staying open. They stay open in my abdominal muscles, right, my core muscles, even like my obliques, even like my lower back. All of that is squeezing to create pressure inside my abdomen, pushing up against the base of the diaphragm. The diaphragm's not pushing up. If the diaphragm goes up, that means it's relaxing, right? It doesn't push upwards. But my abdominal muscles, these core muscles, can create pressure in my abdomen to put pressure up under the diaphragm, right? And so one of my favorite exercises for this is, I call it the strategic breathing exercise, but it's for us to take our scream and we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, right? And so what you can do is you can take this breath in. There you go. You've got your breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. Keep those ribs out and hold them out. And dot, 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 dot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. My ribs are staying out, right? The whole way through. So what if I try that with some screams? Let's try it with the more compressed lows that I've been doing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. Right? Let's do it with something more like loose and mid-range. Yay, blow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. Right? You can do it with the highs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. And you can cycle through these things. This maintaining of our inhaled posture, this staying open, right, but not forcibly so, is a good way for us to handle faster sections, right? Right, so this is an example again of what I'm trying to express, that we don't always manage the airflow by closing the door harder or opening it more. We're not holding the door shut and opening the door. That's not the only control mechanism. A really good control mechanism, and really where we should start, is down here. So that way the work that we're doing up here is only the amount that's necessary. You'll come to Christ for pardon, from sin and Satan suffer. I really should have rehearsed that part before I did the video, but I ain't starting over. Let's finish the song out. I love it. Right? I want to talk about one more thing before I wrap up the video. I know that this video, by the way, is a little bit rambly, a little bit scatterbrained. I'm just going to be real with you all. The ADHD has been real. It's been real lately. I have been struggling. Like, I actually have like a lot of spicy things in my brain, tension, ADHD and obsessive compulsive disorder. And for some reason, they've just been saying hello extra strong lately. And when I have a lot of that spiking of those symptoms, if I'm excited and having fun, I tend to get a little scatterbrained. So if you notice some hard cuts in this video, it's because I was going off on a spicy tangent on my my interest, which is this, right? So anyway, I want to talk to you a little bit about tunnels before we close out here. Oh, Jesus Christ, is this video almost an hour long? Good God. Oh, well, I need a video for tomorrow, so this is the one that's going up. Anyway, I want to talk to you a little bit about tunnels. So I like to think of tunnel as a sound more so than a technique. And what I mean by that is that there are a lot of different ways to do it, right? The most common way is tongue behind the teeth, right there, like this. Tongue behind the teeth, okay? Seal up the sides with your lips. And you can hear that big boomy sound. Oh, hey, everybody, what's going on? A lot of people do this in different ways. That's the way that I am the best at doing it. I guess we could call it basic way. Sometimes I take my tongue and curl it up behind my upper teeth, like this, like a taco. We can do it in different ways. Like Travis Ryan and I think Will Ramos, they curl their tongue and stick it in their cheek. I suck at this way of doing it, but some people do it really well. I can't get the same boominess that they do. See, I just sound goofy. But I've seen other people do it in different ways. And the sound is this secondary echo. Or maybe it's better to say like sort of a, maybe not an echo, maybe more of a muffle. Like this sort of cotton mouth. Situation. Sometimes you see Alex Terrible achieving this with his tongue sort of like laying flat on his bottom teeth. He has more of like an he does like a like he's got some of that going on, right? But for a lot of the more monstery, the more like, beast-like demonic tunnel sounds, I find that this is a really good way to do it. So again, tongue behind the teeth. And the reason I like this way is because I can let the back of my tongue rattle against my soft palate. That sort of sound. And when I do that, pardon me, and when I do that, it makes the high sound really crazy. If you've got whiskers, right, you can also pull on your cheeks to really make it sound nasty. Right? So when we're trying to find these tunnely spaces, this is another area. I've talked about this before on the channel, but the way that I found tunnels was I watched an Austin Dickie, I love that dude, tutorial. And he kind of described it. And I remember when he was describing, even though this is the same thing that I ended up landing on, when he described how to place your tongue, it did not work. I was like, what the hell is this guy talking about? But when he described the sound, he talked about it as sounding like you're talking in slow motion. I had a sound that I guess, so I went in my, I went into the backyard, right, of the house that we were living in at the time, down in Tempe, Arizona. What a good time that was. That was me, the guitarist in Kardashev, the guy who is now the bassist in Kardashev, and my buddy Riley, who does a lot of website stuff. It was just a big bachelor video game house. Oh, great times. Great times. Anyway, see, I'm going off on tangent again. But what I did was I walked around and I just took the basic concept. Just take the basic concept, right? And I looked for that slow motion sound. Hey, whoa, yeah. And then I just started putting different distortions through it and seeing what worked together. I was following sound first and then paying attention to the mechanics second. So, or a mid, or a low, right? So this is another example of what I mean, where it's very, very valuable to understand the mechanics, right, and understand the concepts, but it's also important to take time to be playful with your voice. And again, there's a free course in the description below that will help you have fun with that. And with that, I think that's a good place to end it. I really appreciate you all being patient through my kind of rambly rant. Usually I'm much more reined in for these videos, but I was so excited for this one that I was very scattery. So anyways, Thank you very much. Like, share, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. Many thanks. Much love. I'm out.